Right, so Labour Friends of Israel, or Labour Friends of Genocide as they might also be reasonably called now, and many people do. It's a hashtag that regularly trends on Twitter, as you might well imagine, and is in no small part seen as one massive red flag towards voting for Starmer's Labour for many people, given the conduct of Israel and given that through LFI, the Labour Party is seen as being far too close to Israel. This isn't for no small reason, with the Israel lobby having been significant backers of Keir Starmer's leadership bid, many MPs taking donations from Israel lobbyists, from cash donations for the always opaque office costs, exempt from limits as they are, to jollies to Israel to be fussed and fawned over. Then there's the fact Labour candidates get sent to Israel for education purposes. I prefer my UK politicians to be educated on UK matters, not Israeli ones. But in response to stories like that, many are asking themselves who exactly runs that party these days. Having high-ranking, paid-for Israeli representatives, even on Labour's National Executive Committee, just underlines that, as is the case with a certain chap called Luke Akehurst. Yet now, in the wake of Israel having officially sacked their far too up himself former spokesperson Eylon Levy, that left a vacancy. And that vacancy has now been filled by a former director of Labour Friends of Israel. So how much closer can LFI and the Israeli state actually get? And this should raise even more questions about how close our Labour Party is to that regime and who they would run this country in the interests of. Right, so Labour Friends of Israel, you might have thought this is just an assemblage of Labour MPs benefiting from friendly relations with Israel with all the accoutrements that brings with it. But it's more than that, actually. LFI is a limited company, did you know? It was only incorporated in 2015, it has to be said, as a limited company, and therefore needs directors to attend to financial oversight, certainly. But it also means there are financial records for them too since then, which makes for interesting reading on Companies House, not least of which continues to beg the question of where does their funding come from? But I'm not going to go into that story here. Despite it appearing to be a recent entity, though, as far as financial records go, and its company status certainly does, LFI's existence goes back much further than that. Founded in 1957, in fact, by the Labour MP Doug Hoyle, the father of the currently lousy weakling Speaker of the House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle, whose recent capitulation to Starmer over that SNP Opposition day has raised questions not only about his conduct and his ability to be the Speaker, but also about his own impartiality and loyalties given his family connection to LFI. The power and influence of LFI can't be underestimated. It's regarded as one of the most prestigious lobby groups within the Labour Party and a stepping stone, no less, to ministerial positions within Labour even. So if you aren't LFI, you might find it more difficult to get promoted, and there are equivalent organisations within the Tory Party and the Lib Dems too, but it's Labour that appear to be the most beholden to pro-Israel interests. The closeness of LFI and Israel, the scope of that has always been cause for speculation, but perhaps no more. There's now a former LFI director who held the post some time ago, admittedly, from 1998 through to 2004, so the bulk of the Blair years, David Menser, has been recruited by Israel as their new spokesperson. And he describes his activities on his LinkedIn page during that time as directed and developed the largest foreign policy pro-peace lobbying organisation in the Labour Party. As director, led over 70 MPs and ministers across the Middle East over a 6-year period to educate and promote a better understanding about the complexities of the region, lobbied in Parliament and Brussels using all political tools, supported the Prime Minister, Chancellor, Foreign Secretary, Cabinet and other ministers on various subjects. Yeah, I bet you did. But nothing quite shows how bonkers this guy is than when he attempted to get one over on former Corbyn staffer and Momentum founder James Schneider, as seen here, to show this guy in his true colours.
So that some relief can get in. We're just hearing on your show just now that the UN, who have already had 35, more than 35 probably now, of its own aid workers killed in bombing in Gaza, have run out of fuel, unable to perform any services. This is an incredibly intense humanitarian catastrophe, and that's why the people of this country want to see a ceasefire, and that's why Keir Starmer is failing in his duty as leader of the opposition to not call for it.
Okay, but Dave, the tricky position right here is sitting in your studio, and his name is James. James is, of course, a pound shop academic who underwrote, who sustained, who was the right-hand man of Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn, who certainly failed in his role as being leader of the Labour Party, giving the Labour Party its worst possible election result since the 1930s. But of course, he also pushed me and my family out of the Labour Party, where I was a member for the last 20 years or so. And he pushed me and my family over to live in Israel. That's what anti-Semitism does in the UK. And James endorsed it. James, of course, is not the most trustworthy of people, because he was, of course, before being vaguely associated with the Labour Party, leading Momentum. But of course, before that, he was president of the Lib Dems Society. And of course, he's been writing for the Conservative Home newspaper. So James is a tin pot student politician that really should stay in the student union. This is about big boy politics here.
Okay, well,
this is about real lives.
All right, David. I hear you. There's a lot in there. We learned a lot about James's CV as well here. Didn't know about the Conservative Home bit. But
well, it's not true.
The pound shop academic stuff. I mean, you're not really the man to be talking about this. Is David's point.
Well, I think he's still going. I mean, most of what he said is factually inaccurate, but I'm not really going to. This isn't about me. I'm not here to talk about myself. If we want to have,
but do you represent a view, the Momentum view, the Corbyn view? I think that's overarching.
The position that I represent is what 76% of people in the UK, according to YouGov Pollsport, we want a ceasefire now. That is the common sense position. It, in my view, is the only morally plausible position, and we have a role. Everybody in this country actually has a role in helping bring about peace, because our government is a major supporter of Israel, and we can pressure our politicians, and if they change course, that can have a material effect in the field, that can help save lives. So I'm not here talking for anybody. I'm just saying that this is the case. The reason why the overwhelming majority of people want a ceasefire is because it is the common sense right thing to do, and our political class is not offering it to us at all. Neither the Conservative Party nor Keir Starmer's Labour.
Okay. Thank you to David. Do you want to get a final word in, David?
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of the British people rejected Corbyn's approach to international policy, because this is a terrorist organisation which cannot be appeased, as James suggests. It needs to be defeated, because if it's not defeated here, it will take root on the streets of London. We already saw 100,000 people marching from the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. That means
more than 100,000. I was there.
People.
And it wasn't frightening at all.
People here in Israel. James, you've had your turn. Now it's my chance. It's time to expose your hypocrisy. It's time to expose your love of Jew haters. And it's time to put an end to Hamas. And all right-thinking people, all genuine people would agree with that notion, while, of course, protecting the lives of hostages and, of course, of ordinary Palestinian people.
All right, that last comment may well be seen as a yellow card, I think, from James. I mean, your love of Jew haters, I think you would wish to refute that unequivocally.
I mean, yeah, it's absurd. I mean, I'm not getting into his ridiculous ad hominem stuff, which is offensive, false, idiotic. And most importantly, we are talking about a conflict where people are dying. I don't care if this bloke doesn't like me. I don't care if I like him.
You support evil Hamas. I do not. And right-thinking people.
Okay, I obviously don't support evil Hamas.
Evil.
If he were listening
evil
to what
Hamas,
I'm saying,
child killers,
I'm saying that
women rapers, child beheaders. Yes, evil Hamas, James. You support them.
No, I don't. Anyway, I'll just let him run out of steam, and then maybe we can return to some sanity, because what we're talking about here.
That clip was from late last October, for reference, and actually Menzer went on for a heck of a lot longer, but I think that was enough for me to make my point, get across to you the sort of person he is. Now, one thing worth mentioning, which Schneider didn't himself, is that he's actually Jewish as well, and like many like-minded Jewish and non-Jewish people alike, he does not support what Israel are doing. And Menzer, who knows his position there is indefensible, because he decided to make it all about Corbyn after all, and all about every nonsense disassembled line Israel have attempted to pass off as fact to justify their genocide. And when you're that bonkers and that prepared to sell off what passes for your reputation to become a spokesperson for that regime later on, after all that had come out, whose lies Menzer mentioned there, which have all been disproven since? He blamed the likes of James Schneider for driving him away from Labour, and at a time certainly with Corbyn in charge, LFI's influence must have waned significantly, not because Corbyn was anti-Semitic, but because his leadership gave Palestinians a voice, when before Israel supporters within Labour drowned them out, and, well, that couldn't be allowed to last, could it? Definitely not the case anymore with Starmer in charge, though, eh? Nailed on his loyalties in no uncertain terms and what he's done to Corbyn since becoming leader himself, the undermining of Corbyn's position before then as well, notably over Brexit, and where Schneider was criticising Starmer for not having called for a ceasefire at that time of recording. Of course, we know it took months before he did, and even now many don't believe him because it took so long. Old school Labour Friends of Israel appears to be very much back in charge and back at full force, and David Mentzer, a former representative of that, is now a representative of Israel. Now that he's the new Eylon Levy, as we saw him struggle to manage to do the job the other day on Channel 4 News, where Krishnan Guru Murthy didn't give him an inch with his non-answers and attempts to talk propaganda instead. We're going to see nothing but that from this daft little man going forwards. He'll make Israel into a parody more so than Eylon Levy ever did, as mainstream sources will keep platforming him, but in no way will he be any more credible. Certainly no more than anything else that comes out of Israel is. More worrying is there are those like him with significant influence once more in Starmer's Labour, though. So be careful who you vote for, eh? Eylon Levy's fall from grace is as hilarious as it was so avoidable. A story of a gigantic ego going too far, getting too big for his britches, and causing a diplomatic incident with the UK, no less. If you've not seen the details of this, you'll enjoy it, I fancy. If you've watched this video this far, your video recommendation here awaits, in which case, for you to watch next. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.